geologist, and Maria Bataska, engineer in the technical branch. We've got several from Waste Management and Terrapon, a consulting engineer with them. Roger Lawrence, the Chief of Solid Waste, and Catherine Beninati, with Public Outreach and Assistance of ADEQ. Briefly, what ADEQ is all about, if you go to our homepage, you'll see right on the top, we protect, enhance, and restore the natural environment for the well-being of all our Kansans. The way we do that is through various regulatory programs listed on the right: air, water, solid waste, hazardous waste. Solid waste being who I represent here tonight. The primary function of those divisions, or one of the main functions of those divisions, is to review permit applications and issue permits. And after permits are issued, to inspect and compel compliance through enforcement actions. But there's some other things going on at ADEQ besides just regulating and permitting and inspecting. We've got, like I said, the Public Outreach and Assistance Division is responsible for helping the public, disseminating information, education and outreach. We've got different types of environmental monitoring going on with ADEQ, the air quality monitors around the state, keeping track of air quality. Water quality, the inspectors are pulling water quality samples from streams all around the state, and that's an ongoing compliance aspect. There's small business assistance through permit assistance with facilities that can't afford consulting engineers, and also loans available if you install equipment to recycle or decrease emissions. There's that loan program available, and also certification of recycling tax credits if you're purchasing equipment to recycle. We have a program to certify that the equipment is eligible for tax credits under state law. About solid waste generally. Everyone knows we all generate solid waste. I mean, whether you're a household, whether you work for an industry, if you visit a commercial outfit or an institution like a hospital, everyone generates waste. We've got to have management practices in place to deal with that waste. There's a lot of modern concept going on nowadays of how we need to properly manage solid waste. And the best thing we see going, or the most productive, is the concepts of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, reuse, recycle. Where the goal is to first try to minimize the amount of waste we make through less packaging and less use of materials. And then if we do make a waste-like material, go ahead and reuse it if it's at all possible. And next step, recycle it, extract it from the waste stream and convert it into something that can be reused in another form. We encourage and have laws on composting, which tries to take yard waste, which is by some accounts 13% of the total MSW waste stream, and take the yard waste and convert it to a soil amendment type product. Diversion mandates exist, but they're hard or they're not real feasible sometimes if you don't have when I say diversion mandates, what I'm talking about is legally barring some materials from going into certain landfills. Example of e-waste, I mean, electronic waste, the big concept is it's good to keep e-waste out of the landfill, but we're working towards trying to set up that groundwork for actually being able to do that, and that can be a difficult thing. And last but not least is your disposal methods. Through all those things that I just mentioned, we've had significant reduction in waste, which we still have a need for disposal sites. And landfills still remain a viable alternative and a reasonable option. And that's why we have rules and regulations to permit those as needed. And to decide if we can permit a landfill or if they're needed, ADEQ puts heavy reliance on your local decision makers. Landfills are not that much different from other public infrastructure like streets and highways or drainage projects or police and fire control. We rely heavily on public decision makers to weigh in and complete the public processes for approving sites and approving the locations of those sites. This is the waste management hierarchy I just talked about, where the steps go from most preferred to least preferred, and landfill disposal being basically at the top, where it's least encouraged and least wanted, but it still, like I said, remains a viable and needed concept, and viable and needed types of sites. These are your regional solid waste management districts. I mentioned that we rely on public decision makers. Regional solid waste management districts are a culmination of local counties and city governments. They're the ones responsible for making the decisions on waste flow, making the decisions on approving sites. The Echo Vista landfill is located in the Boston Mountain solid waste district, comprised of Washington and Madison counties. This is just a map of the disposal sites permitted in Arkansas. You see they're scattered all around the state. The Class 1 landfill, municipal solid waste landfill, are represented by the stars or the triangles. And you'll see the scattering around the state, but you'll also notice that in northwest Arkansas is one of the fastest growing and becoming a larger populated area of the state, but you don't see that many disposal locations in northwest Arkansas, and that's really caused by a couple of things. Mainly, the northwest part of the state is in a sensitive geologic location. The Boone-St. Joe Formation exists. It makes it more difficult to locate a landfill in an appropriate location in northwest Arkansas. And on top of that, if you do find an appropriate location in northwest Arkansas, there's additional regulations that apply to those landfills, additional protective layers on the bottom, additional investigation. And it's a more expensive landfill to build. So that's why you see difficulty and less sites in northwest Arkansas. The real reason why ADEQ regulates landfills is pretty simple. Because landfills do exist, we do need safe disposal locations that protect the air quality, protect water quality, whether it's surface runoff or whether it's groundwater quality. That's why we have landfill rules. And if you follow those rules and regulate and permit a landfill properly, you can protect public health and the environment, and that's the basic fundamental goal of ADEQ. The way we regulate landfills is through a series of law that was passed through the 70s and 80s. The RCRA, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, which is more or less adopted by the Arkansas Solid Waste Disposal Act. Those laws developed through the 70s and 80s and laid out the groundwork for how landfills are sited federally and in Arkansas. They are really the backbone to Regulation 22, which is Arkansas Pollution Control and Ecology Reg, listing all the special rules, the specific rules for landfills. Through those laws and statutes and regulations, we can develop landfill permits. Landfill permits regulate the design, the layout, and basically how cells are built and where and how and what capacity and how they're used and how they function and what minor layers exist, but also the operation, the day-to-day operations, as well as field progression, site life, how landfills close, and eventually how they monitor along the way. Permits regulate reporting, how you monitor groundwater and landfill gas, and what you do when you see things and how you report that to the agency. And on top of that, inspections are required. Facilities do their own inspections at least once a year with their consulting engineers, but also ADEQ will inspect landfills every 3 months. We do a physical on-site operation inspection by our regional district inspector. This is basic landfill development from a regulator's perspective, from ADEQ's perspective. As we see landfills proposed and applications come to us, this is sort of the summary of events that happen and how we see it come in. Landfills select a site, whether it's a government-run landfill or a privately run landfill. They go and they make the call on what they decide, where they decide to put a landfill. And ADEQ is not involved in that process up front. They go pick a property, they acquire a right of entry or ownership contract, they decide it's a good site, they then contact their regional local officials, county officials, solid waste district officials to begin the process of the approval documents that are needed to begin the first steps before they even apply to ADEQ. When they get that information up front, they then prepare a pre-application to submit to ADEQ. That's where we are today. Waste Management has prepared a pre-application for their expansion. They've identified some area and they've submitted that pre-application. After a pre-application is deemed complete and the preliminary studies are done, the company, Waste Management, or anyone in general, will go back to the drawing board. They'll study the site in great detail. They do a detailed geologic investigation. They complete that. They use that information to prepare engineering plans and design. Then they submit all that in the formal application, a much bigger, more complicated document. Our staff reviews it and issues findings, and eventually they work towards a permit through the public process that exists. After the permit's issued, there's construction. When the facility constructs cells, usually every year, every other year, they'll construct disposal cells. They construct that and document the construction, also certify that work back to ADEQ. ADEQ occasionally or routinely will go to those events and investigate, in addition to the quarterly inspections. In operation, I mean, they follow the permit, follow the plans they've submitted. They follow what they say. They monitor. We inspect. There's groundwater monitoring that will occur per the permitted plans, landfill gas monitoring, all through series of wells where they try to pinpoint any leaks should they ever occur. If a leak ever occurs, there's a corrective action process that exists that tells exactly what they have to do, how they investigate that, how they make decisions to correct leaks if they ever happen. Eventually, they exhaust all the airspace and closure happens. They put a low permeability cap on top of the landfill. They cap the landfill and go into a period of what's known as post-closure care. That for municipal solid waste landfills, Class 1 is generally 30 years, at minimum 30 years. This little drawing is basically a basic summary of what a modern landfill would look like. You see on the bottom, it depicts a liner system, usually multi-layer of clay material or synthetic plastic. In addition to that, above that would be a leachate collection layer, a layer of sand, and a system of piping to extract leachate from the bottom of the trash to minimize any leakage. Above that is the waste. As it fills and begins to generate landfill gas extraction wells are installed where the gas is recovered. At some sites they can even use the gas. And I guess last but not least, you can see the
turn on the side, Brian.
Over on the side, you see this represents a well. There are multiple wells permitted around Class 1 landfills to detect groundwater issues if the landfill would ever leak. And that's to monitor the aquifer that rests below the landfill. I mentioned that the Echo Vista landfill is located in the Boone-St. Joe region, northwest Arkansas, being a little more sensitive environment. It's known as a karst environment where the ground is broken somewhat. It has characteristics of caves and sinkholes and seeps and springs. In this formation, there's additional regulations that apply. There's additional separations from the bedrock and the groundwater that provide additional distance between the waste and the groundwater and the rock. There is the double-line bottom liner, where I said most landfills have a layer of clay and have a layer of plastic. Landfills in the Boone-St. Joe actually have another layer of clay and plastic. In between those layers is what's known as a leak detection layer, where water is actually extracted between those layers and tested to see if the first layer has ever leaked. And the upgraded final cover standards, and that's just additional layers or additional specifications on how those layers are placed and the engineering specifications that go into that. Pre-applications, that's where we are. I just mentioned that we're in the pre-application phase, that we've deemed the waste management expansion pre-application administratively complete. It contained all the resolutions and documents documenting the approval processes that exist. It contained notifications to other regulating agencies like Game and Fish, Corps of Engineers, FEMA concerning floodplain issues, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and there's several others that probably slipped in my mind. In this process, they begin the process of notifying those other agencies to see if they're affected by other rules. And they also declare a facility type. That would, obviously, this is an expansion to a Class 1. They declare this will be an expansion to their existing Class 1 landfill permit. Now, when we complete the pre-app process and complete this meeting and investigation tomorrow, Waste Management will go back to the drawing board and prepare their full application. They will address all the restrictions. They'll address all the regulatory requirements on liner design and operating standards. They will outline a detailed plan for how monitoring wells are laid out and how often those wells are monitored and what constituents the wells are monitored for. They will have documents on how the landfill closes, financial assurance bonds in case something should happen and ADEQ has to close the site. We have bonds for every landfill to make sure that they can be closed no matter what happens. And just ongoing monitoring. They spell all these things out in the application. We review that. We produce technical findings on that and work with the applicant to sort through all of the detailed regulatory requirements. Usually letters go back and forth a couple of times. The facility makes changes, applications, eventually satisfies all parts of the regulation, and ADEQ is left making a decision. We have to make a formal decision about the application. We make notice in the local newspaper that we've decided to issue a draft permit. We call out to the public again to provide comments. So we solicit comments from the facility, from the public, on any matter, technical or regulatory matters that may apply. We review those comments. We consider every one of them, and we respond to every one of them. Eventually, when we prepare all those responses, we prepare a final permit decision, and we prepare a final response to comment document, and that's sent out to the facility and also to everyone who commented on that permit. And a final note, after we make that final permit decision, you're only eligible to appeal a permit if you made formal comment on the record during that comment period phase. So what ADEQ is involved with at Echo Vista, where we are right now, the facility's got several permits. We're talking about the Class 1 landfill today. They also have a Class 4 landfill. That's a landfill which only accepts bulky, inert, non-putrescible waste, such as construction and demolition material or other debris like concrete, bricks and asphalt types of material. There's a yard waste composting facility out at the site, which is accomplishing that goal to extract a portion of the waste stream and then turn it back into a useful material. There's a Title V air permit, which is largely regulates the landfill gas that the facility produces. I understand there's a landfill gas to energy facility at the site. Dave can tell you more about that. There's registered tanks, fuel tanks at the site, and then last but not least, the stormwater management. Very important to have a system of ditches and ponds to control sediment from running out of the site. The landfill history began in the 70s, about the same time ADEQ came online and began permitting landfills. This site was permitted. It existed. There were several modifications that came about over the years. Most recently, in 2006, a 46-acre expansion, which is the area which they operate in right now. And today, this is the beginning steps on the proposal of a 33-acre expansion. And where we stand right now, we're at 3 years of site life under the current permit. So, contents of the pre-application, This is the formal notice to the public, the first stage, and letting everyone know exactly what the company's looking at is they've identified 33 acres that's going to be investigated for Class 1 waste. And the conceptual number right now is 4.9 million yards of waste material would go in that location. And at the current usage rate, which is variable based on a lot of things, economy, population, contracts, and everything else, the site life is projected to be 14 years with the expansion. This is a map that was included in the pre-application. It just shows proximity to US 412. Now I believe this is Klein Road. Clean. This is a little closer in version of the map of the site, where this is the 33 acres depicted. Right in here is the area being investigated. And it shows the other areas. This is the area they're currently operating in, right in here. These are older areas over here, and this is the Class 4. Another drawing, this just shows topography. And the next steps in this process, essentially, we're wrapping up the pre-application phase. Tomorrow, ADEQ staff is going to visit the site. We're going to investigate. We're going to walk the area, look at geologic features on the surface. We're going to excavate some test pits just to get our first eyes look at what the new area looks like in the ground. After that point, we'll prepare a findings report, and ADEQ will close the matter of the pre-app, and we'll just essentially wait. Waste Management will go back to the site and complete investigations on characterizing what the subsurface looks like. That goes into how the engineers prepare plans. And at some point, they will prepare a full application and submit that to ADEQ for review to continue this process. So I'm not taking questions at this point. We're actually going to go to Dave Conrad of Waste Management. He's going to give you a little bit of their side, of their perspective of the concept and what the site would look like.